Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back again to Deen Seekers. And today we have a very special guest with us in this episode, Dr. Hamza, who's a practicing GP, somebody with experience in the field of medicine. And that's something that we want to explore today, talking about medicine, talking about how it affects our life, and as Muslims, how our approach should be looking at the world of medicine. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead. Remember to follow and subscribe on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify, always don't forget to comment, like, and share with your friends and family. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing, Dr. Hamza?
Alhamdulillah, good, mashallah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. How's the week been so far?
Yeah, it's been okay, alhamdulillah. Just busy week as always, but alhamdulillah, good.
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Joining us straight from work. Allah barak. May Allah reward you for coming here and accept the efforts from you. Barakallah feek. So to get straight into it, inshallah, the first thing we want to kind of delve into is something that many of our listeners may be interested in as well. Yourself being, mashallah, GP, being a doctor in a surgery. If you can tell us just a little bit about of what you do, what you you specialize in, inshallah, and how it is, being a doctor, and what kind of work it is that you're doing, inshallah.
Yeah, so alhamdulillah. So I'm as a GP, as you mentioned. So what I do is I work in a GP surgery, and that involves mainly seeing patients in my surgeries. I have a morning a clinic, and I have an afternoon clinic as well. So I see patients of all different backgrounds, different ages, which is, I think, one of the things that really drew me into general practice as well, especially because you see people right from when they're born up until, as they grow older. You see families developing, you see people reaching old age, you meet their family members, you're with them through the difficult times, and you're also with them through the happy times as well, because often when you get to know them, they also share their happy moments as well with you. So I really enjoy that aspect. It's a people's profession, so you're always kind of dealing with people and dealing with their issues, and it's a very rewarding profession as well, alhamdulillah, and also very one which is humbling as well, because you really see what people are going through, and the battle that they're undergoing with their own illnesses, not just physical but also mental illnesses as well. So alhamdulillah, it's an enjoyable one as well.
Alhamdulillah. So what made you want to get into studying studying medicine in the first place?
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because for me I can't say that it was something that I always wanted to do. It was actually my grandfather, actually, may Allah have mercy upon him. He had a dream, or he wanted one of his sons actually to become a doctor. And me being the first grandchild and also the eldest, although his sons didn't become mashallah, they went into their own different professions and successful in that. But it was almost kind of left to me in that sense, because I was in the first grandchild and almost like his fifth son in that sense, and he loved me a lot as well. So his wish was for someone to become a doctor. And for me, I thought, how much my grandfather, the care and concern and compassion he showed me, and someone who I'm grateful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought him into my life, really, and I had those moments with him. So it was almost just to fulfill his wish, really, of wanted to become a doctor for that reason. Alhamdulillah. So that was the main driving force, really.
I mean, that's mashallah, that's amazing to hear, because that's something that we really need, that respect for our elders, and not necessarily always having to fulfill their every wish, but trying to make them happy and trying to make them the coolness of being the coolness of their eyes. I ask Allah that you are the coolness of his eyes. May Allah have mercy on him. Alhamdulillah, that's good to hear, mashallah. So how was the journey in becoming, like, obviously it's known to be very something quite difficult. So a lot of people, they step into it, and then not many have what it takes to follow through. So I mean, just to not to go too much into this area, but just some advices or tips you'd give maybe to your younger self, or those that are willing to tread this path as well.
Definitely, I think from the first one of the first advice I would give is it's not easy. I think you have to be prepared for that there are tough moments, and you have to make sacrifices. You have to look at people around you, because it's a long graft really, in terms of the amount of study you have to do and the amount of time it takes really to become a doctor and to qualify from medicine and get a medical degree. So it's hard, especially when you see the people around you, your group of friends who have maybe either haven't gone on to university, or maybe they went through a different path and they're already working and they're already earning money, and then there's you who's having to really put in those long hours, and you're not seeing those instant results, right? And subhanAllah, it reminds you of, in terms of the Deen, because we're putting in the efforts. We may not see our efforts in this life, and our focus is on the akhirah. So it's that delayed gratification, So you have to keep that in mind, that eventually it will pay off. Even though people around you look as if they're enjoying themselves, they're earning money, they're able to have that free time to do other things, and you're having to really sacrifice that time to put into the study. So it is tough, and definitely I can't say that I found it easy all the time. It was there were definitely tough moments as well. So I think what's one of the first advices that I would give is be prepared that it is tough, but it's also very rewarding as well. And I think if you have that end goal in mind, that eventually it will pay off, if you put in the hard work, then
Alhamdulillah, inshallah. So going a bit into this now, obviously now being practicing GP, and with the hours that you have and so on, how would you say, what would you say are the challenges, especially being a Muslim doctor, with your obligations and with Jum'ah and the salawat and all these things, and then obviously family as well. How would you say the balancing, what do you think, from your perspective, balancing these things?
I think you have to first of all know what your priorities are. I think in life, I think with any profession, there are many professions which are demanding, and they take a lot of your time. So you have to realize from the offset that you're not going to be able to do everything, and you have a limited amount of free time. So you have to be able to manage that and find out what your core values are and what's important to you, and then be able to devote. And for us, being a Muslim, first and foremost is our relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making sure that we're fulfilling obligations, because ultimately, you could be a doctor and you're saving lives, but if you're falling short in your salah, if you're falling short in your obligation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's definitely a major wrong there, and almost a kind of, what's the point of doing all those other things if you haven't actually done the fundamental, or you've foregone that really. So it's important to get that right. And then like you said as well, with family, that's important. They have a right upon you, and I think subhanAllah, that hadith just comes to mind about giving everybody their right. That our own body has a right upon us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a right upon us. And giving people, everyone who has a right upon us, giving them that right. So I think if you know that and you realize that, then you just plan accordingly, really.
I mean, also, one thing just to add to that, I feel, subhanAllah, one of the things that's amazing is the hadith where Rasulullah ﷺ said, من نفس كربة من كرب الدنيا أو من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة. Like, this is a type of grief that you're relieving of the believer, and Allah will remove your grief on the day of judgment. And subhanAllah, the hadith continues to say, والله في عون العبد ما دام العبد في عون أخيه. That Allah is in the aid of the slave as long as he's in aid of his brother. So subhanAllah, imagine, I was thinking, as a doctor, if you have that intention every day, every morning, going through that graft, going through those hours of helping people, removing the grief of them, subhanAllah, the reward is immense. And of course, just because you're getting a salary for it doesn't mean that it's removing from any of that aspect of reward. So subhanAllah, and that the fact that there's such a great reward shows you that it's not an easy thing to do, to be at the service of those people and help them, because surely I'm sure you've come across very challenging circumstances or individuals that can be a bit difficult to deal with, but you still have to be professional and Or is that something that you come across like?
Definitely. And I think, and I suppose, I wish I was able to remember that all the time, because inevitably you don't do at times treat it just like a job, where you're going in and it's a job, you're getting paid for it, alhamdulillah. But to keep that in mind, like you mentioned, that intention that you're actually going and you're helping people, you're relieving them from their distress, and people when they're in their difficult moments in life and you're able to be there to help them, I think it's really important, and that's definitely a reminder for me, and for those who are working in that profession or wanting to go into that is to keep that in mind, that if you have that intention that it's not just a job, it's actually you're going and helping people. It's very rewarding.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, inshallah. I mean, it's an amazing thing as well, like, the aspect of it as well. So moving on, inshallah, another thing that I want to mention is about understanding cure, or understanding, first and foremost, obviously, when we think about the word shifa in the Quran, it's used primarily in the Quran to refer to the Quran itself. يا أيها الناس قد جاءتكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور. O people, and subhanAllah, here Allah mentions people, Muslim and non-Muslim, regardless of where you're from. A maw'idha, a reminder has come from your Lord, and something that is a cure, a shifa, for that which is in the hearts. So subhanAllah, as in when we think about, like in the world of medicine and things like that, what is the kind of understanding when we hear the word cure in comparison to what we understand as Muslims or from the Sharia?
Yeah, and I suppose in if you like, in medicine, it's more about removal of the disease.
Yeah.
So whether it's, for example, a chest infection, you give somebody antibiotics and they're cured, and the disease has been removed. So that's how we view cure as meaning, is when the disease has been removed.
Okay, subhanAllah. I mean, that's interesting, because obviously that is a similar concept that we have with the shifa, that is something that's just removing the harm, from the chest, or it's removing harm from the life, and that is why the Quran has come to be that shifa for, you could say, primarily the spiritual being, the ruh, the soul, and that is why Allah mentioned it like that. But Allah also mentioned, I just remembered, Allah also mentioned the word shifa in the Quran for example, honey. فيه شفاء للناس. In honey is a cure for the people. So subhanAllah, again, it's also referred to in the physical sense as well. And inshallah we'll get into perhaps talking about things like that as well. So yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting here is some Muslims maybe think that, as a Muslim, as a believer, I put my trust in Allah, I don't need to take these medicines. I've come across many people that have come to me and said that, like, I'm not taking my medication that the doctor prescribed to me. I've got Allah with me. So this is something that I think we need to obviously deal with as well, both from somebody who's a professional doctor and also from the Islamic perspective of as well. So like when it comes to these type of people, like what is it that how do we advise these people? What is the best way to go about, like, when somebody who's a practicing observant Muslim that doesn't really understand this concept, and he'll say this to you, how would you usually react to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would tell them that, by seeking a cure doesn't go against tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
And and I'm sure maybe you'll go on to mention the advice of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam about seeking cure. So I would tell them that just in other parts of life is you tie your camel, and this is that process, and also it's remembering it's how you view that as well. So when we don't, whenever we're going to a doctor or a doctor's giving treatment, we never negate or we never remove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the equation. And I think that's, as a Muslim, is important to bear in mind, because, and I've seen it, because I can give you an example of where patients come in and you give a medicine which you'd expect that the textbook says or the theory says this is going to cure this disease, but it doesn't work for that patient. And the patient says, you've given me this, you told me that this is going to cure me. and for other patients it does work, but you realize that actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the equation. If He wills, He will put shifa in that for that person. If He doesn't will, then it's not, despite what the textbook says. So it doesn't actually go against tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I suppose it's how you view that. This is a mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided, and as long as it's a halal means, it's a permissible means, then
100%. I mean, subhanAllah, what you just said there is very important. The fact that this is something that applies to everything in life. Somebody who's going to do his business, he's gonna have to put the graft in. He's gonna have to do his part and all those things. But in the end, it's gonna come from Allah. He can't say I'm not gonna do anything and expect that it's from Allah. And subhanAllah, like you mentioned, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Tadaw, take medicine or seek medicine, for Allah has not created or sent down a disease except that there's a cure for it, except for, and in one narration, illa al-haram, except for old age." Old age there's no escaping that. Right, exactly. No matter how much they try with all these modern things, there's no escaping your time to go. So subhanAllah, 100%, that's very important. And this is actually a misunderstanding of tawakkul, like you mentioned. And it's not something that is actually separate from tawakkul. Part of a tawakkul ala Allah, or reliance upon Allah, is doing the means. A quick case study is when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made hijrah to Medina. He didn't just like walk out in the open and I'm just gonna, he went and found the best person who knew the best route. He went to the house of Bakr at night time. He had somebody to go and scout and see what's happening. All these things, he took the precautions. The materialistic ones, you could say, but he also took the spiritual side as well. So when push came to shove, he reminded Abu Bakr that Allah is with us. We've done our bit. Allah is going to do the rest. As subhanAllah, like he said, person takes that medicine, never should he take Allah out of the equation. No, Allah is the one who's gonna, through this, is gonna provide me with shifa. So I think that's subhanAllah, important that the Muslim has that mindset, when looking at not only medicine but anything in life, subhanAllah. So moving on, inshallah, again with this idea of the concept of shifa coming from Allah, but we do take the means as well. For those obviously that are people who are Muslims and practicing and suffering from different illnesses, obviously they have also the aspect of looking at the Quran as a shifa. How do you think this is important, looking at the Quran as a shifa in their process of getting over or trying to overcome an illness or something like that? What would you say in terms of like how that affects them, perhaps mentally, psychologically, spiritually?
Yeah, definitely. I think, a lot of with illnesses, especially chronic illnesses, is it's the mindset, dealing with that mindset, because when you're ill, when you can't do certain things which you would normally do, when you're weak, especially when you're somebody who's generally healthy, and all of a sudden you've been affected by an illness, it definitely plays on you. So there's a big mental battle going on, really. And I think from the drawing strength from the Quran to be able to deal with that, and remember, the Quran reminds us about the nature of this life and the test, that people go through, and being an illness can also be a test as well from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So having that reminder from the Quran as well definitely helps in the healing process as well, because as I mentioned, if you can get your mindset right and have that positive mindset as well, that also helps the healing process.
I think as well, on that note, how is it, how would you say the difference is with somebody that has strong belief in Allah and somebody that has weak or no belief in Allah? Somebody who's just a complete, doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in anything. Do you notice that different mindset perhaps, or is that something that, is there something that you can see in there sometimes, like when somebody has a strong mindset, especially when it comes to these diseases or chronic diseases, or things that are like cancer or life-threatening?
Definitely. To be honest, I see it is the mindset, and I suppose the resilient nature of it as well, because it gives you answers rather than having the approach where if you're struck by an illness such as cancer, the why me approach of why has this happened to me, but as a Muslim, we don't think like that, in fact, you can almost at times also see it as a blessing, as a purification for you. If it's going to bring you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's a win-win, the believer, if he's, struck by a prick of a thorn, that's an expiation for him. And so in that sense, it's that mindset, whereas the disbeliever doesn't really have that concept of, having it being a purification for them, or their sins being forgiven, or the means for a greater reward in the akhirah. They don't have that. So that's the one of the major differences that I noticed. Whereas those who are strong in their belief, they have that strength to be able to deal with what have the patience. Have the patience, exactly. Have the patience to deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. SubhanAllah. It reminded me of what Rasulullah ﷺ said, that the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. And here, this actually, although there's an aspect of physical as well, but this is actually speaking more mentally, because if you continue in the hadith, and Rasul said, strive for that which benefits you, and don't give up. Ask Allah for help, and don't give up. And if something should happen to you, then you put your thing in Allah. And if you did everything, you tried your hardest, and things didn't go your way, then don't say, if only I did that, if only I listened to this person or that. Just say Allah has willed it, and Allah does as He pleases. I think that's amazing, subhanAllah. Even if you think about it in the context of like illnesses and things like that, person has that strong mentality that I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna try my best, and whatever happens, I'm happy with what Allah has written for me, subhanAllah. Yeah. So is there any like maybe anecdotes or anything you have that you can think of? Sorry to put you on the spot here, but like where you've seen a patient that's gone through something difficult, and you've been surprised by their reaction, be it a good one or a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's been many, that you really do come across of patients, especially, you see them in those last moments of life, the end of life, and you see how they just what's going through their mind and their reflections on life. And I suppose it really, you see that moment dawn on them where they've realized the fallacy of what this life is actually, and how much, the effort that they've been putting in, whatever it is, whether it's been to try and, have a good future for their children. But then it dawns on them that at the end of the day, it's a temporary nature that look at the state they're in, all that they're just leaving behind, even though it may not necessarily mean that it leads them to Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they have that moment and they realize that this life is a temporary nature, and in the end of it, death is inevitable. It's not something they can escape.
And that's ajib. That's what Allah tells us in the Quran, مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٌ. The enjoyment of this life is very temporary, very is very short. So in terms of like when you see that, what kind of different reactions do you have, like from, for example, people who don't believe in Allah? What kind of things what's their sort of reaction towards this compared to maybe somebody who's a believer? Like, have you seen those different type of like reactions?
Yeah, I mean, you get different from, for example, a disbeliever. They may say that, we've had a good life in that sense. They look back and say, I've lived to an old age, and I've had a good life. Others will kind of have those regrets and sadness and sense that they wish they could have stayed longer and these things. You do that mixture, but from a believer, you see that sense of sabr in them, and that sense of where they getting ready to meet their creator. And I suppose it's a different. You definitely see that difference between the believer and disbeliever.
I suppose that's more you see clearly. I've got a purpose.
Yeah.
That's I've got to follow this purpose right till the end. Whereas the other one is like sort of like it's just you're not sure whether you're coming or going. SubhanAllah. But yeah, it's amazing to be exposed to that aspect. It's people who are coming to the end of their life, and it's a reminder, I suppose, for you as well, a big reminder, seeing that day in, day out, subhanAllah. When it comes to also the fact of looking at, for example, when it comes to performing ruqyah, when people like, and we don't have to talk about ruqyah, some people have that perception that it's only for if I've got like a jinn or if I've got some sort of magic or something like that. But ruqyah is something that we can do every day, even if you're feeling healthy as a horse or whether you got cancer or anything like that. So ruqyah is something that you can, do on a daily basis. So again, that sort of aspect of healing, you could say. Where do you think it plays that part? How does it help patients if they were to focus on the aspect of ruqyah?
You know what? I think that's just to kind of widen that out a little bit. And I think, sometimes we may have this mentality where it's one or the other.
Yeah.
It's, for example, it's only seeking shifa through ruqyah or through, maybe some of the Islamic means of healing, and where we can't go to Western medicine, or that actually it's Western medicine and we can't use ruqyah if we're only going to be, say, taking a tablet or whatever that may be. And I think my advice would be to say use both. They're not contradictory,
100%.
And they're not, in terms of, they're not going to clash with another. It doesn't mean that if you're taking a medicine that you can't do ruqyah as well. Taking ruqyah is not going to have any adverse impact on that tablet that you're taking it. And in fact, as we mentioned, the shifa is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You giving that tablet doesn't mean that it's going to guarantee that person is going to get. So it's about, seeking whatever is available to you to be able to seek that betterment and that cure or that alleviation of that suffering. And we know from, that the Quran is a healing, as you mentioned. So I think combining both, I would really say that it really has a role to play.
I suppose back to it again, that whole idea of, taking the means and also having that trust in Allah. So you doing that ruqyah on a daily basis is part of your tawakkul in Allah, that, Allah, this what I'm taking, this is only a means. You are the one, that has that shifa. SubhanAllah. I mean, it's ajib, when we look at the stories of the prophets, we look at the likes of Ayyub alayhi salam, who went through such difficulties, and even then Allah told him to do certain things. He didn't just send down miraculously. He gave him the spring to wash from, one to drink from, one to bathe from, and that cured him. The Yunus alayhi salam, after he came out of the belly of the whale, Allah gives him yaqteen, or was it pumpkin or squash, and he commands him to eat from that. So subhanAllah, look at that, Allah has given him the physical means and also accompanied with the spiritual means. So these are the prophets of Allah, and they are taking the means as well. SubhanAllah. So moving on with talking about medicine, talking about cure. Obviously we have Western medicine in terms of what's known. What are the other alternatives that are out there that people could look to and maybe could think about? Because sometimes it's not all about the cure, it's also about the prevention, and that could be anything like you've come across. There's a few things that we can explore here, but what would you say are good alternatives or just general tips?
I mean, I think that's important, really. I think prevention is and there's a big focus now on prevention, because if you look at the disease burden in the West, for example, a lot of them are preventable diseases, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, even cancers as well. A lot of them are related to lifestyle. So there's a big push and a big emphasis on about prevention, whether that's in the form of eating better, exercising more, adopting healthy, making sure we not doing things like smoking and these kind of bad habits, really. So there is a big emphasis on that, really. So because if you can prevent the disease from happening in the first place, then that's always better, really.
SubhanAllah, that's also a principle in the religion, that the prevention is better than cure. And this is actually one of the meanings of the hadith when Nabi said la darar wa la dirar, meaning no harm should the harm should be prevented in the first place if the harm does happen, then it should be cured, or it should be stopped as much as possible. So the asl, or the basis, is to prevent it in the first place.
Yeah.
Don't have that in the first place. Subhanallah. So like in terms of like with these alternatives, like, or are there other type of things that like a lot of people, they refer to like what is it called, like herbal medicine and things like that. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, are those things that are they medically sound things to look towards? And
yeah, I mean, I suppose that's when you have to kind of put your, especially for the Muslim physician, you have to put your different hats on. So, being a Muslim, I don't say that there isn't shifa in these things, because ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who puts shifa in things. But as working as a doctor in the medical profession, we can't really advocate for these kind of things, and that's purely because it's not based on the evidence is I suppose is lacking for these things. So we have an approach, we call it evidence-based medicine, which is, I suppose, ironic in terms, obviously, with our Deen, we're evidence-based as well. So in medicine, so we can't recommend anything if there's no evidence to suggest that particular thing works. And that doesn't mean that particular thing, whether it's herbal medicine, is something that doesn't work. It just means that there isn't much evidence out there to say so. For that reason, we can't really advocate. But as a Muslim, I do believe that there is healing, and you've come across it, from not just from patients themselves who have tried it, but even from personal, from people, family members, friends who have maybe tried a alternative medicine, and they've been cured from that means, really. So I wouldn't say I'm against it at all. Definitely not against it. But I, being a medical professional, I have to be very careful in how I explain to my patients, especially really with regards to that.
And I think that's important. How you said, the evidence-based, this is what the scholars say, and this is an Islamic principle as well, in terms of when it comes to looking for things that are of benefit, whether it's physical benefit or like, to do with your health. They say if you don't have something that is mentioned by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if you don't have something that is proven in the scientific world, in the world that we do know, then it can't be, it's not permissible. It's not permissible to advocate for those things as well. So that is completely in line with our with our approach from Islam as well. And some people will be like opposed to that. They'll say, oh no, this is just a way to, then all the conspiracy theories come with that as well. But subhanAllah, like you said, just because it worked for someone doesn't necessarily mean that that's evidence based, and we have that in the Sharia as well. Like, you can't just say, because that's where people came with different types of practices in Islam. So I did this dhikr or something like that, or I recited these ayat in this particular order and this and that, and it worked for me. You should try it work for you. SubhanAllah, imagine how many different practices would be innovated into the religion had that been the case. And likewise, the same thing with healing, or with cure. Just because it worked with someone, that you don't know, there's not enough evidence, like you said, to prove that happened for that person. So 100%, I think that's important that people understand that as well, from an Islamic perspective. If there's no proven benefit from there, it's not something that we can look to as a cure. Allahu A'lam.
It's fine. A thought came to my mind, that there's so many things in medicine, the principles which go with the Deen, our Islamic principles that you mentioned, even the prevention aspect, how this is from our Deen as well, and we see it in medicine, evidence-based medicine, as we've just mentioned, even other things, subhanAllah. This is something which I think about, and I think about the NHS that we have in the UK, and I think that having worked in the NHS and seen it, for me, I feel that if there's any health system which I would say is closer to the Islamic concept, if Islam was to have a health system, very much I would say the NHS is up there, being very close to that, because there's so many principles that I see in the NHS and working in medicine, which are completely just, you can see the Deen, the principle, how they've come from there, or or how they actually correspond with what our Deen teaches us. Subhanallah, it really is a, and it's a it strengthens your belief as well, because when you see that and you think, subhanallah, our Deen has those principles in play, even the concept of ihsan, and how I see how very much it's about quality, because especially when you're working in that environment, infection control, and how, especially before surgical procedures, how they're very much about hand hygiene and making sure that things are sterilized, and doing things well, giving patients anesthesia. Why? Because you don't even want to make them feel any bit of pain. SubhanAllah, it goes to the concept of when you're slaughtering an animal, do with ihsan, and you're dealing with human beings here. So there's so many principles that, honestly, that just jump out to you, and you think, subhanAllah, this is what our Deen teaches us.
And that shows you the natural aspect of the Deen, that, sometimes they don't necessarily get it directly from the Deen. They have done that before, and we know from the Muslim pioneers of the past, where they learnt the sciences and things like that. But sometimes people, sometimes we feel like we have to always kind of trace it back to Muslim history, but we don't need to always do that. The reason why is because our Deen is a Deen of fitrah. Our Deen is a Deen of natural disposition. So everything that they're doing is something that Allah has naturally inclined them towards, subhanAllah. Wanting to do things in the best possible manner, wanting to do things with avoiding pain. These are not things that just happen randomly. They're not like evolution, as they said. These are things that Allah designed, subhanAllah, and that is why our Deen is a Deen of nature. That natural feeling that you have, that's why, so many of the things in the Deen are in that aspect, subhanAllah. So, it goes without saying that, if you have successful things, I know obviously NHS like before used to be a lot, but those principles that they were on were undoubtedly from naturally feeling that this way is the best way that we can offer. Obviously then when, things start happening and, downfall for everything, nothing reaches its peak except that it goes through the downfall, obviously. But the aspect that, even though perhaps people are, they're not Muslims and so on, they have that natural inclination to do these things that are apart from the aspect of the Deen. We shouldn't be surprised by that, because our Deen is a Deen of the natural way, subhanAllah. That's where you see, even things like justice, for example. People wanting justice, the Deen is about justice. Them wanting justice naturally is something that is ordained and in the fitrah that Allah has placed, subhanAllah, within us. So moving on, inshallah, when it comes to, and this is something that I think we all need to work on, living privileged lives here in the West, is our lifestyle, healthy eating, observing your patients on a day-to-day basis and seeing what kind of illnesses they go through. How much you say, well, this has a role in, like, illnesses and, all the problems that they suffer from?
A huge role, honestly, a big role. Lifestyle in general, but specifically, when it comes to eating, because, if you look at, we are in a, if you want to call it a epidemic obesity, where, not even just adults, but even children now, if you look at them and they're overweight or obese, and a lot of it is down to we're consuming, too much. Very calorie rich foods. Our diets are not healthy. There are other reasons, obviously, as well, lack of exercise and physical activity as well, but focusing on diet specifically here is that it's a plays a huge role. We don't eat the right foods, and the amount we eat as well so it's not just about the type of food, but the quantity.
On the quantity, subhanAllah, this is a common misconception. A lot of people, they start from the middle of the hadith where Rasulullah said that a third for your food, a third for your water, a third for your air, but they never look at the start of the hadith. That is enough amount of morsels for the son of Adam, that which will help his back to be upright. Right. Subhanallah. That is the basis.
Yeah.
And then Nabi said, if you have to, then a third.
Yeah.
So subhanallah, I think that's the problem when we live in the privileged life that we do, and that comfort, to have that discipline. Unfortunately, many people fail. I speak for myself, having to have that discipline. And subhanAllah, that's the blessing of having things like Ramadan, trying to fast on a regular basis. To have that, obviously, primarily is to worship Allah and to obey Allah, but we can see that there's we're not supposed to just be people of, indulging. We are supposed to have that discipline, subhanAllah, that controlling that nafs to some aspect, not allowing it just to go freely. More into, so I mean that's obviously quantity as well, but more into like the types of food that we're eating. What do you think is mostly like? Is it like what kind of foods is it that we're as a doctor you'd see like a lot of people are? Is it like like outside food or like certain type of food?
Yeah, definitely. I think so junk food is a big problem.
Yeah.
And especially in the I suppose in the Asian community,
Yeah.
Junk food is a big problem because obviously we like it's
Sweets.
easy, sweets, and
Yeah.
and it's an easy option just to get maybe a takeaway or something like that, really. Especially with we have, I suppose, we see ourselves having busier lifestyles, so people don't necessarily have time to cook now as well. So, and especially when you have households where both the husband and the wife are working, then it's just easier just to get to takeaway. It's just quicker having to rather than do the effort of cooking. So that plays a big role. So that's a big part, just junk food in particular, and then the sweets. That
I was just offering you some sweets.
Yeah,
earlier on,
exactly,
sorry.
exactly. And I'm guilty. I have a sweet tooth as well. So that's a big problem because there's so much variety, and I think that's the choice. There's so much choice now, and it's so accessible. Imagine if you had to, to get that sweet, you had to travel like 2 miles or 3 miles, to just to get that thing. Nowadays, you can get it delivered to your home.
Yes.
So, and that makes us because the access and the ease of getting that, it's just on the touch of our, fingertips. We can just, reach for it and get it, really. So I think because it's so easy to get and it is tasty, let's be honest, the sweet food, that's the reason why it's popular, because they are so tasty because they've got a lot of sugar in and things. So the healthy option is not always the tastier option, is it, unfortunately, but
so I mean I think that's another issue as well, like obviously that whole lifestyle as well. I remember growing up as well, takeaways, and I'm sure maybe you can relate as well. Takeaways was like a special occasion. Oh, we're getting a takeaway today. Like, it's almost like unheard of. But now, like you said, subhanAllah, people are having it almost every other day, if not every day, some of them. And that's really scary when you look at it, subhanAllah.
Absolutely.
Like, how the food's being prepared, what the ingredients are, with the competition that's going there nowadays, they're not looking to get the most healthiest of ingredients in your food as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and that reminded me, the same was that when I was growing up, it was, when my dad used to get, takeaway, it was as a treat, really. It was like maybe a once a month or even less than that, to be honest. And I think for me, it was amazing when I was able to get it for myself afterwards. It was like, wow, now I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, now I don't have to, I can actually just go and get it. It was a big moment for me. But now you think about how it's just everywhere now.
Yeah, subhanAllah. It's crazy now how it's the whole industry of it. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, again, that's where the challenge is for people to have that discipline and be able to strike that balance. I think that's very important as well. I think the other aspect as well is how important is their actual lifestyle in terms of how active they are, what they're doing. What would you say is important in their as a prevention? Like what kind of things they should be doing on a weekly basis or daily basis?
Yeah, I would say keep moving. I think that's the thing, because we live in a if you look at now where society has become a lot more sedentary now, whereas before people, the type of nature of life, their jobs, very physical demanding. They weren't just coming home and, for example, nowadays we maybe just sit on our laptops, or if people watch TV or whatever, we just sitting down. Whereas before people were moving, they were active, and even we were talking about just getting things, they had to travel and reach things. Nowadays we can just get things delivered. So I think we really need to get moving as a society, whether it's form of, whether it's jogging or walking, or doing those kind of cardiovascular exercise, even things like martial arts and these kind of things, which are really important because they're physically active and also important skill to learn as well. So find something, what I would say is find something that you enjoy doing and works for you. Might be playing football, for example, might be walking or jogging, whatever, or running or something, really, but something that you can do and be consistent with.
SubhanAllah, yeah. As we have a saying in Arabic, say al-haraka baraka. The movement is a blessing.
Oh, mashallah, I might use that now.
Yeah. Al-haraka barakah. So it's a very important thing. And that's something that the elders would say.
Yes.
Because they're used to that lifestyle of just constantly moving. And if you think about the food as well, I'm sure as well, like in the Asian culture as well, like they used to have a lot of fatty foods. But all of that would be burnt with the amount of movement is like the graft that he's doing during the day, at home as well, working. He's gonna be walking all the time. Now we just, like you said, everything's at the fingertips.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave your house, and you got things coming into you.
But even for mental health, just to add with mental health, that movement, that's one of the things we say to patients who have got mental health problems is be active and exercise, because even it releases something called endorphins, which are your natural chemicals, if you like, which uplift the mood. So exercise does that, so even that, it's not just physical health but mental health as well.
And that's worrying as well, because I think a lot of people, when they have those mental problems, they end up just not moving at all. They sit at home and not do anything. So that's potentially even more detrimental.
And overeating, not moving and overeating, comfort eating.
Yeah. SubhanAllah. So is there anything that you could say from a medical perspective? I've always been interested, with these things, in terms of, obviously the Sharia has mentioned various different types of nutrition that are forms of cure as well. Like namely dates, honey obviously is in the Quran. In fact, honey is the one that is mentioned in the Quran as shifa. Fihi shifa'un linnas. Obviously black seed. Those are the ones that usually, Zemzem obviously as well. In terms of just the those type of foods that you hear about, is there anything that we can maybe relate to in the medical profession? Is there anything that's research has been done that you've come across?
Definitely. I mean, honey, let's take honey for example. I mean, for example, if patients have a cough, that's one of the things we do say to patients is have honey, because it does, one of the things that it does is soothe the cough. But actually in honey we have sort of bandages, or you could say for wound care, we use it in wound care. So there are actually honey impregnated dressings that are used, which actually, because it's an antibiotic type of component, and it's an anti-inflammatory component, so we actually have that on the in Western medicine on the NHS. We use that, so we're already using honey. Subhanallah, in these things really.
That's, Allah mentions in the Quran, fi shifa'un linnas, and it is a cure for the people. Subhanallah. So obviously as well, when it comes to other, subhanallah, Allah mentions many different types of foods in the Quran, that which was even used on the prophets, like mentioned, the fruit that comes from the ground, yaqteen, which is what Yunus alayhi salam had, is something that actually comes from the ground. So it could be anything. It could be watermelon, melon, it could be pumpkin, and anything that grows from the ground as well. And is there anything about that in terms of eating food that is from the earth? Is there anything about that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, obviously organic. I think that comes to mind. With organic food, I mean, which is free from sort of chemicals and also pesticides and these things. So natural foods are a big component. So that's definitely advocated by the medicine really, in terms of rather than having processed foods. What's the alternative is processed food, which are food which have a lot of additives in and manufactured, whereas those natural foods, fruit and veg, we have the concept of 5 a day. Fruit and veg. What are fruit and veg? These are natural foods that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So very much we are for having a natural diet.
Alhamdulillah. That's good. Another thing that I wanted to maybe go into is I think so in terms of our sisters as well, especially sisters who have chosen to be at the home, being a mother, looking after the family, and that's going to be very difficult in this day and age with how society is kind of pushing them to have the dual income and things like that. What kind of health tips would you give to them? Because I know you're saying that there might be issues for them as well when they have that sort of lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that comes to mind is vitamin D.
Yeah.
So generally, obviously, living in the UK because of lack of sunlight,
Yeah.
a lot of us have vitamin D deficiencies. But there are certain, you could say, groups of the population,
Yeah.
such as women,
Okay.
especially Muslim women, because of not just in terms of they're in the house, but in terms of the clothing, because of the
Okay.
covering that they
Wearing
wear,
the hijab. Yeah.
hijab, that even when there is sunlight, they don't get enough of that production of vitamin D.
Yeah.
So, my advice would be to take vitamin D over the counter, so supplements
Okay,
that you can
yeah.
get. And in fact, this is from the Department of Health. The Department of Health, specify that people should be taking over the counter vitamin D between November and March, those months really.
The cold months.
Yeah, the cold months really. So, and those who are institutionalized, those, for example, who are in care homes, or the elderly, or I said, women that are, maybe spend most of the time at home.
Yeah.
It's important for them to be taking vitamin D, especially really, because it's a deficiency, and it does cause problems with bones as well, weak bones and muscles as well. And even, more and more research is coming out that even obviously with mental health as well, it has an impact on many things really.
Oh, okay. That's something that's interesting. I never knew about that before. So as in, like, if there's a sister that's at home, looking after the children and things like that. I mean, if this nice sunny day or something, she has a garden, it'd be good for her to go out, you'd say, then, to get that vitamin D.
Yeah, definitely.
Naturally as well.
Natural sources are always the best,
Yeah.
So if they're able to get that natural source of vitamin D, that's always the best thing to do.
Moving on, inshallah, I want to go into something that is a bit more. Some people, I think most people tend to be understanding of these things, but there is an aspect of our community who have wrong understanding, and that is about the whole idea of the preservation of life, whether it be through life support or resuscitating somebody. What are the issues that you've commonly heard, or what tends to be the problems that people have with this?
Yeah, I think that's they are important topics actually. So let's take do not resuscitate. So for those who don't know, so do not resuscitate is where we put a instruction in place, if you like, where we say that this person is not for resuscitation, meaning that if their heart or they were to stop breathing, then we wouldn't offer them resuscitation, which is where we do rescue breaths and chest compressions. Now that doesn't mean that person would just be, it wouldn't be offered medical care, but it just means that the resuscitation wouldn't be attempted, because resuscitation is a type of medical intervention, and the success rates are not that high really. And in fact, the more illnesses and the person has, and the more weaker they are, the chances of that working anyway in the first place is very highly unlikely. And if it does, then the person may be left with brain damage because of lack of oxygen to the brain. They may be left in a very sort of maybe disabled state really. So for that reason, we tend really to try and, especially if someone who's got a lower chance of survival from that, we tend to advise people not to go ahead with resuscitation, because it's also very, for those who have seen it as well, it's a very traumatic way to go. Where if you do chest compressions, you can actually break somebody's ribs. And nobody really wants to see their loved one in those last moments being subject to that for something which at the end of it is not going to work for them anyway.
So just to a bit of clarification, is that like for a certain like would you list somebody like a patient who's, you'd label them as don't resuscitate, or is that kind of just a blanket sort of thing? Like let's say a person's at home and they have somebody that they're looking after or something like that, and they're generally healthy, and they do happen to, like, are they advised to try CPR or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So absolutely. So CPR is brilliant when it works, and it's a really good tool to have or a skill to know. And in fact, I really encourage people in the community to go and learn CPR because, you know, you never know where you may need it when you're out and about, and you know, there's not always going to be medical help there available. And often the chances of survival are the sooner that it's done, the more chance of survival. So survival decreases the more time that person is in that state, really. So the quicker we can get CPR, the better it is. So that's why it's really important. Now, as a default position, everybody is for CPR, unless a form is put in place. So there's a form called a Do Not Resuscitate form. So that's when we actually we do a form to say this person isn't for resuscitation. But yeah, as a default position is if somebody was just healthy at home, you know, no problems, we would assume that person is for resuscitation unless we have an instruction to say otherwise.
No, and subhanAllah, you know, if a person has that, like I said, if you're in that, you never know when you could be in that situation. وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا. Whoever saves a life is like he saved all of mankind. So this is something that is in Islam, you know, something that is definitely virtuous. And on that as well, I think what people find very difficult is, and you know, may Allah not test us with this, is not something that's easy as well, is when a loved one is on life support and you know, I've been involved as an imam as well, where, you know, the wife is not willing to let the husband go, and everything, you know, is brain dead and all these things. Like in terms of that, is there a lot of that happening, and is that like causing medically? Is that causing like more harm to the body as well? Just staying on the life support machine, or
and I suppose it's that feeling of not wanting to let go. I think that's where the issue is. It's because all that's really, you know, driving them is that machine, effectively. So I think people, you know, may think that, you know, by switching off that machine, you're killing that person. It's not that. It's just inevitably we're all going to die. So it's just letting that take its course, really. And I think that's important to remember. But it's a very difficult decision. It's not an easy one to make. And you know,
but as in like the reality is, a lot of the times when they are on the life support machine, everything else is shut down. Is usually that the case? Or
that's the thing, that they're relying on that machine to basically, you know, keep their organs you know, sort of working, really. And without that, then, you know, they wouldn't be able to.
I mean, a lot of the fatwa, they say as well, if it's on a person who life is not, you know, there's no hope for the life, then the Sharia is quite clear in that aspect as well. Because some people will say, like, no, hey, like you said, they think that you switching that machine off is killing them, and so on. SubhanAllah. Towards the end, there's one really important thing that I think maybe we should go through, inshallah, and that is those who are you know, patients that have come towards the end of their life, and you know, either through old age or through certain illnesses like cancer and so on. What kind of things do you see from there? What kind of advices could you say are important at that stage?
You know, that's a very, very important, because there is a big emphasis on giving good end of life care. Because especially when we have you know, end of life care is applicable to all, but you know, especially when we have an elderly population, a high elderly population. So, you know, we do encounter people with terminal illnesses. And end of life care is about, again, you know, it's another concept, subhanAllah, which is, you know, you really see that how it's so compatible with Islam, you know, about making sure that person, their last moments, that you're making it as easy as you can for them, you know. So we have things like, for example, certain medications we can give to sort of help with their breathing, because one of the things that people suffer from is their breathlessness, which is a very very distressing situation for them to be in, where they feel that they just can't breathe. So there are sort of medications to try and help with that. Pain is a big thing, you know, when and especially for their family members as well, because, you know, you see them, and often it's the family members who are a lot more distressed by that, because they see their loved one and they say, you know, are they in pain? Is he in pain? Can he feel this? Can he feel that? So, you know, you see that how much agitation it causes at the family members. So, you know, alhamdulillah, we have these, you know, tools at our disposal where we're able to, you know, alleviate their pain, alleviate and make things easy for them, really. So it's a really beautiful concept, this end of life care, and not just in terms of obviously the medication available, but just the whole approach, setting the, I suppose, the ambience, the environment around that person, you know, even where they want to be, you know. So, you know, you can have things like advanced care plans. We call it advanced care plans, where the person, they plan where in terms of how they want to die, in the sense of where they want to be. Do they want to be in a hospice? Do they want to be at home? You know, who they want, I suppose, around them. You know, subhanAllah, so many concepts which are, you know, I suppose compatible with Islam, really. And
I think one thing though that I find striking is this is just the nature of us, as Allah mentions in the Quran, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ, that the pangs of death, they're coming without certainty, you know, with certainty they're coming, without a doubt. ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ مِنْهُ تَحِيدٌ, that is what you were trying to get away from. SubhanAllah, we try so hard to get away from, but it's going to come. And, you know, SubhanAllah, Allah even talks about that ending, as you said, in Surah Al-Qiyamah, where he says, وَظَنَّ أَنَّهُ الْفِرَاقُ وَالْتَفَّتِ السَّاقُ وَقِيلَ مَنْ أَرَاقُ, that when they're seeing how he is, and they say, where's the Araq, is the doctor? Where's the doctor? At that stage, subhanAllah, this is Allah talking about the nature of man. At that stage, وَقِيلَ مَنْ أَرَاقُ وَظَنَّ أَنَّهُ الْفِرَاقُ, and he knows that this is the end now. وَالْتَفَّتِ السَّاقُ بِالسَّاقِ, and the leg goes over the leg. And this is, they say, it means like he can't do anything now at this stage. SubhanAllah. I find it, SubhanAllah, it's amazing. That's the reality of all of us.
Yes.
You know, you see, and I think this is where, as well as people need to understand that when they're seeing physical pain and whatever it is, to understand that is them coming to the end of the physical realm, and there's a spiritual realm that the medicine side will not be able to explain. You know, all the other things won't be able to explain. That is something, as Allah said, they ask you about the ruh, they ask you about the soul. Say that, you know, this is an affair from your Lord, which you have little knowledge of.
Yes.
SubhanAllah, what is happening to that that person who's dying? We have no idea what's happening. SubhanAllah. We could obviously, the science, you can say, like, you know, the brain's dead and this is happening and that's happening, but the reality is there's a whole other realm taking place. That, you know, and I suppose that's why people have these things where they'll say that, you know, there's certain signs of the person dying, the breathlessness and all these things, subhanAllah.
Yeah.
So we can explain it scientifically, but there's a whole other realm there that people don't understand as well, of the realm of the ruh, what is happening, what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned to us as well, that, you know, the soul is being taken out. If it was that of a disbeliever or a person who was disobeying Allah, then it's a painful process, even though we may see them going through it in a, you know, peaceful process.
Yeah.
And likewise, it could be a physically painful process for the believer, but in reality, it's being removed in a way that is peaceful for the soul. And subhanAllah, even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through those pain. He said on his deathbed, he said, you know, how painful are the pangs of death. And he said, you know, this is the last that I will go through of difficulty in this life. So subhanAllah, it's the inevitability, something that we cannot escape, the inescapable, subhanAllah. But yeah, I mean, obviously we must come across that as well, in terms of people like being worried about that, being worried about the whole you know, situation of, or, you know, I'm coming to the end of my life. So you'd say it's just like the concern of the people tends to be what mostly is just like I said, it's just more of how can I get through this easy?
Yeah,
is that
absolutely. Yeah, they don't want to suffer, and I think that's also from the relatives as well, that, you know, they want them to be as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of the focus is on, are they suffering? You know,
Yeah.
are they in pain? Are they in discomfort? You know, or questions we'll ask, for example, if relatives are not there with their loved one, they'll say, you know, were they in pain? Were they suffering? You know, so and if you can sort of say to them, look, you know, we try to make sure that, you know, they were pain free, or you know, they were distress free, then that, you know, kind of
Eases
helps,
them.
really eases you
Yeah.
know.
But I suppose, subhanAllah, at the end of the day, that is you as a professional doctor having to deal with the physical realm.
Yeah,
Subhanallah.
exactly.
It's not on you to have to say to them, listen,
Absolutely.
he was going through this or that. That's something that's from the unseen.
Exactly.
Subhanallah. And I think that's important as well. Like, you know, people might be distressed with. I'm pretty sure, like, you maybe seen this. I've not seen it myself, but when somebody's leaving this world, the scenes of that can sometimes maybe be distressful, right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. You know, seeing that, subhanAllah, it really is an eye opener when you see, you know, I suppose death right there. You know, and you're having to, you know, see the whole process of those last moments of the person in the last few breaths. It really is something that does strike you if you've not seen it before.
If you don't mind, I mean, because we're coming to the end now, like, would you care to, like, it's a reminder as well for me primarily. I'd love to hear, like, what have you ever experienced seeing that, and what have you, like, you know, what kind of experience is it?
I mean, it's a very much you know, it's definitely is a humbling experience, sort of looking at that, and when you see that person there, it is. I mean, it's definitely a sad moment looking at that. Here is that individual, that human being, and they just, you know, they're about to leave this world, and subhanAllah, like you mentioned about, there's aspects that we don't know about, or we don't see. You know, the ilmul ghaib, you know, the ruh's about to leave, and there's angels. You know, subhanAllah, when, as a Muslim, you think that the angel of death is there, you know, and we're just walking, and you know, it's not our time there, but for that person, their time, they're leaving this world, so the angel of death is there. And you know, subhanAllah, you just think about, you know, being in that environment, and when you think about the hadith about how the soul is taken out of the believer, and how the soul is taken out of the disbeliever, and you think, subhanAllah, you know, there's angels present in this environment, and that this person is soon about to depart from this, and also there's nothing, and there's, you know, people around. How many people there's? You've got machines there, you've got doctors there, you've got the loved ones there. No one can do anything. You're helpless at that time. You can't stop that soul, not from, you know, you can't do anything about it. You know, you've got the best maybe medical equipment, the whatever there, but
it's time to go.
Time to go, isn't it? People are just helpless.
So, you, like, obviously, I'm sure you've, like, seen this as well, but you know, like, when they're taking their last breath, like, is it something that's like I think maybe sometimes people just, like, dramatize in their minds that, like, it's like a final breath kind of thing, or is it just like a?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, it is literally just, it's not like a, you know, like a you know, we do often sort of, you know, we dramatize. It's not quite like that, really. That kind of moment, it's more of a just I suppose a fluid kind of just transitions into it, rather than a specific moment there that this is that. Yeah.
So, like, what you'd pronounce them dead at what moment particularly, like?
So what we do is we leave it a little bit of time, really, because you know, the body's still going to be quite warm and everything. We don't do immediate, but after some time, then we do checks. So there are certain checks that we do to confirm that this person has passed away. So it involves, for example, checking their pulse, listening to their lungs for a heartbeat as well, checking if they respond to any painful stimulus. So you might squeeze a finger to see do they respond. Checking their pupils, we shine a torch into their pupils. If the pupils react, that's obviously related to brainstem. So if there's no reaction, then
so usually the pupils have, like, sort of roll back, or
so the pupils, they you know, subhanAllah, again, they're these about the pupils, they go up, the gaze goes up, and you see it.
Subhanallah.
You know, how it looks.
Because that's the last thing to follow the soul.
You do see that. Subhanallah.
We ask Allah to grant us a good ending.
Ameen.
And with that, inshallah, we'll come to the ending of this. And once again, Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you for going through with this. I benefited a lot personally myself, And I'm sure, inshallah, as well, our listeners have benefited. To wrap it up there, inshallah, if there's any closing remarks that we'd want to finish up on, inshallah? Or...
Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah for having me, mashallah. Really enjoyed it. It's been an honor to be able to be part of this as well, inshallah. And I hope, inshallah, we can, so much more, I suppose, we can discuss.
Definitely,
I'd love to be
inshallah.
back again, inshallah.
We'd love to have you here, maybe on something specific to the medical world, inshallah, that we can benefit from. inshallah, we'll finish this. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.